I was the Johnny Appleseed of of change, of being the change, and I would sprinkle seeds of change out to people where it was fertile, and I would encourage them. Entry music, da 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 da. It's the Bob and Josh Show.
At the core of agile is change. Whether it's happening to you or you're creating it, it's always there. So, how do you become that change agent that continually drives your team, your department, your company to success through change? That's what this episode's all about. It's easy to say you're a change agent, but sticking your neck out there, being the one saying, hey, let's turn left when everybody is saying, let's turn right. Somebody has to be that person. It takes a little courage. We're going to talk you through it. And our goal is out of this episode, you walk out this afternoon, tomorrow, whatever it is, whatever change is needed, you're ready to go make it happen. On to the episode.
Today's episode is about change, but it's an extension from the Michelle Polk, the last episode. And this is about being the change. So this is representing the change, modeling the change, being the change. And just what does that look like? So Josh, what does that mean to you, that notion of being the change? And what bring it back to maybe the Dude Solutions or something like that. So give it like a real world context if you could.
Often it's a leap of faith based on a wild belief. And that's how Dude Solutions was for me. So I was presented with an opportunity to build a process, a team, and a product from scratch. And I had all these ideas of how it could be done as I was in previous companies looking at what was happening around me and saying, man, I wouldn't do it like that. Like, okay, that's good enough to say. It's not good enough to say, I'm not going to do it like that. Well, then how would you do it? And so that moment came, and I had to have real belief in those thoughts and ideas to be willing to stick my neck out there in front of the board and executives and all of that and say, hey, we're doing it this way. And it wasn't normal. It wasn't standard. It wasn't something that folks could look around and say, oh yeah, you're modeling it after that. No, we were doing something completely different. But I had this intrepid belief that it was the right thing, but it was scary. But it was also that fear was encouraging. As I talked to our fledgling team in the first couple of months, it was like, hey, here's the good news and the bad news. And we'll start with the bad news. The bad news is there's no one to blame but us. So if we screw this up, it's just us. All of those times that you blame people upstream or whatever, that there were existing processes or things that just made things hard, none of that exists. That's also the good news, that there's no one to blame but us. So we have full control to, if we find things going in a different direction that we would prefer, we're 100% in charge, and we can correct that, and we can correct that quickly. So it was this balancing act of like, oh my God, if we screw this, like, what have I done in my career? And then, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, we're going to make something really amazing. But it wasn't easy, and it was hard work. And it took a lot of faith from a lot of people to support that model.
I love the way you started that, Josh, that leap of faith. And then your use of intrepid, just
I know. What can I say?
You are like, I don't know who you are.
Well, my middle name is Thesaurus.
I was going to say Silver Tongue, maybe Silver Tongue Thesaurus. I can't say that quickly. So, no, but as you were talking, I was like, yes, it's the courageous side. So be the change requires courage, requires risk taking, it requires leadership. One of the things I was thinking about you, like as you were talking, my mental image of you was you were out front. So I think being the change is not a lead from the back posture; it's a lead from the front. The other phrase, and I don't like this phrase, but fake it till you make it. I have mixed reactions to that phrase sometimes, but in this case, it's that you don't know where you're going, so you're leading from the front. And again, this goes back to, what does being the change look like? You're leading from the front, and you don't freaking know where you're exactly what the future holds, right? So there's a bit of boldness there.
The fake it till you make it is interesting, because when you're going on an uncharted path, which is what real change often is, that's the reality. And
Right.
I don't know any way around it.
I agree. I think folks, I'm throwing that's what was going through my head as you were talking. But I actually like the sort of the leap of faith.
Mhm.
Do you ever see it? You remember? I think it was Indiana Jones, the first one.
It
Do you
was
remember
the
the?
it was the 3rd one.
Oh, it was the
It was
third one with
yeah.
Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Remember Sean Connery? And there's that bridge
Yep.
across. Whenever I think of leap of faith as an
Mhm.
image, and I actually think metaphors and imagery, at least for me, is really useful.
Yeah.
But you know where he's looking across, and then he puts his foot out,
Yep.
and boom, that is the imagery, and how scary that is.
Mhm.
You don't know there was there he didn't know it was going to hold him up, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
always think of that scene. That's an interesting scene for me for that. What
Temple of Doom is still the best Indiana Jones movie, and there's no debate. So, okay, Bob, sorry.
I'm not planning on arguing with you in any way. What so I had in preparation for this, what are some of the steps to being the change? And we talked about some. And then what stops us from being the change? And maybe we've touched on some of that stuff. So what does it look like? A little bit more detailed steps. And what are the inhibitors? What prevents us?
Well, the inhibitors is certainly easier to answer in that it's fear, and fear in a handful of directions. Fear of just failing, and is this thing actually going to work? Fear of perception, of I am going to be the odd one out here, and what are people going to think? What are they going to say? Am I just going to get like bullied? I mean,
Yep.
that's reality. It's not just grade school where stuff like that happens, but bullied in social media or just across the company. There's like that's a real thing of you know just doing something different, and also there's I find a lot of that bullying comes from the comfort in the pack, and the pack like starts to get nervous when someone breaks out and does something different that
Yeah.
they like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you special? Why are you different?
Right.
What makes you think you can do this but we can't? And it's not that they can, it's just that I'm choosing to. And there's all that sociological, that's probably not even the right word, uh pressures that are there. And you have the reality of a job and a paycheck and mortgages and kids that are turning 16 and getting their license this afternoon, and now your car insurance just shot up a whole bunch. You have all those realities where folks will often dial it back and be unwilling to
Right.
take that leap of faith, because it does require faith, because there's so much risk. I mean, think back to that movie. Like he was going to die, and
Yep.
not only was he going to die, but his dad was going to die because he had to get through that.
And that was
Yeah,
so there were some
yeah,
positive drivers and then fear and things
yeah.
were the negative drivers. um, about that. Last time we were talking with Michelle about force field analysis, and that's actually part of this. Being the change has forces that are driving you forward to the change, or not
Mhm,
to some degree. And then what are the inhibitors? And there might be few here and many there. I also think, and psychological safety. I saw that fear and imposter syndrome. I really like what Kenya said about be courageous instead of fake it till you make it. I personally trigger or anchor on courageousness. I think there's a courageousness aspect. But folks get sedentary. I've worked with a lot of folks. I I I don't I think it's so all of those things matter,
mhm.
but I've worked with a lot of folks that are just stuck. They don't it works fine this way. They're the same folks that probably what is it, that frog joke where you just raise the temperature of the water?
Yeah, well,
Uh,
and we, did a whole episode on getting pickled
yeah,
and how that
that's
happens. Yeah.
that's the maybe that's the way to couch it is you become pickled in the culture. And so fear is a part of it, safety is a part of it, but damn it, you're just pickled. A lot of people and I think a remedy to that is just emptying out your stuff, like cleaning out some of your assumptions. What's that Bruce Lee quote? You're not going to learn. So the cup, you've seen those martial arts films where some sensei who looks who's old and looks like me is pouring water into a cup and it's overflowing. And look, and so clearly you're not going to learn anything until you do what? Until you empty your cup and get rid of some of that old baggage that you may have.
Yeah, it's so I can at least tell you what drove me towards making those leaps of faith. And I don't, I struggle to settle with like good enough. That's always been difficult for me to accept. And I wasn't presented with enough positive leadership role models. We've talked about the anti mentors being the mentors that I had as I grew up.
Right.
And it was just, okay, I had this list of things that when I was in this position, I wasn't going to do. And then I got in that position and I felt this responsibility to myself of, oh, Steven's saying he can't hear me. Okay. We'll try
I
that
can hear
again.
you. I
Okay.
can hear you, Josh.
Okay. All right. Then I'll start over again. I struggle to settle. And when presented with an opportunity where I don't have to settle,
Just
then
read.
there's this responsibility for me to make that happen. Yeah, I don't know what's happening in chat.
No, no,
Steven's
no,
Steven's
no.
leaving me.
No. He's just said you could have stopped at that word. You didn't have to continue on. It's not that he didn't
Oh,
hear
I
you.
get the joke. Very good, Steven. Very good. Very good. Maybe I should. I mean, well, the problem is that I've got this mentor next to me that never settles for a forward answer.
It never stops.
He never settles with those are enough words. So it's what happened is I got to that moment and it was like, okay, you did all this big talk. And now it wasn't like I was
Yeah,
externally talking, but like in myself building this up of like, oh, hey, you said you were going to do this and you said this was going to be better. Now you have the opportunity, like, don't back down. Don't be a scaredy cat, which was how I felt. So I felt this responsibility
right.
to act in that moment and to really try that change even though it was scary. But that's what drove me was I had all these built up frustrations and I couldn't just recreate them and then look myself in the mirror 6 months 12 months later and say, well,
Right.
I just did the easy thing. And I couldn't live with myself. That's just not how I'm wired.
I think there is a part of being the change is what's in it for the change artist, or for the person who's being the change.
Mhm.
And there's all these inhibitors. I think it's growth. It's it's doing something about it. So if that's what you're articulating, to me, I mean, I do whine. You know me. I'll grouse about things and I'll whine, but I'm internally wired. Once I get over the whining, I want to do something about it. I mean, and I've gotten probably worse or better over time. I mean, the Metacast is doing something about it. The books I've written, a big part of the motivation for writing for me is helping people and doing something about it. Now, I don't think that's for everyone.
Mhm.
That may be an inhibitor. You know what came into my mind is Pareto, the 80-20 rule. And it's probably, so probably out of every 10 people, maybe one or two people are wired to be those change artists, those leaders, those courageous leaders that lead through change, either as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, either whatever they're doing through organizational change, etc. What do you think? React to that. I don't think there's a lot. I think there's a minority of them. I
It's
think
yeah, it like that's even difficult for me to accept, because what I worry about is folks listening to this episode and being like, "Well, I'm not wired like that, so I'll just write it out the way it is." And it doesn't have to be like that.
it
Uh,
doesn't. I would agree.
yeah, and
I don't think there. Yeah,
it's not that you have to make a big change, but you can make a little change and make a difference. And sometimes the little changes are the ones that really matter in the end. It's not the big grandiose, like, let's reorg and restructure. How many reorgs have you been through that didn't actually make life better? But it's those little changes that everyone can drive, everyone can create, that you stack a bunch of those up and you're in a really great spot. So yes, I think there are naturally aggressive change agents that almost, like myself, I catch myself telling myself to slow down because I want to change so much. I want to change it right now that I need
Yeah.
to pace it for the people I'm working with because they likely don't want to run at my pace because sometimes my pace is crazy. So I've got to learn that. But then there are other people, like, I mean, River agrees. See, she agrees. She's like, you
Whatever
just
you
gotta do
said
it.
got her really excited right now.
No, it's two of her siblings are leaving, so she's angry at them.
You know what, Josh? I think I want to disagree with your characterization. Yes, but I think it's more persistent, right? Yes, you're aggressive, and yes, you've talked on the Metacast about taking on too much change. But if I look at you and say Josh is a change agent, right? And what are the attributes that drives that? I think it's more like dogged persistence, right? You're not. You're going to drive a change. You're going to sort of and you're going to meet all this resistance, but you're not going
Yeah,
to succumb to the resistance.
yeah,
Uh, the dude, and then the other thing is you were talking about little change. Yes, little changes. Uh, but I'm going to shine a light on your dude change as you look back. So this is me channeling through you. My I look back on my career and there were some boring times or average times, and then there was something that I drove and it was hard and it was a change, but it's the hallmark of my career.
hmm,
It's where I developed the most, where I learned the most, where I established relationships. So do little ones and big ones, but I mean these are so why do it? Because it matters.
yeah,
It's the things you're going to look back on and you're going to write them in your memoir. You're not going to write the safe stuff. You're going to write these, even if you failed. You know what? I failed. I
yeah,
I went down in flames, but damn it, I did it my way. I'm channeling Frank Sinatra now. So, but react to that with dude. What do you think? Any
yeah.
reactions?
As a business, if you look at the dude, you could easily label what we did a failure. Uh, because in the end, they decided to acquire a company to replace the product that we were building. And so there was a lot of money spent with me and my team, but from a spreadsheet balance statement, you could easily label it a failure. But there is no way it was a failure for those 100-ish people that were a part of that. It shaped us and who we were and who we became, and has enabled other folks across their career to go and do similar things, not copy,
Mhm.
but use what made sense for them because that's how we worked. There are a ton of people that I stay in touch with that have pulled parts of that has helped them throughout their career. And that to me, that's the difference. Like there's millions to be made and millions to be lost in business. Check. Gonna happen. But the effect on humans is the thing that I think you and I really center on that enables that to be what we value. Now
And I
the
think, go ahead.
just I I often label myself as erosion of I'm going to win in the end. You might not notice it along the way, but we're going to slowly wear this mountain down and we're going to look back in some amount of time and have worn that mountain down to just a hill. And that has required a lot of little changes. So it wasn't always all of these big, like you take the
Right.
sledgehammer, you knock the mountain down. No,
Right.
it's a compilation of thousands of little changes that are made along the way to enable you to use those grains of sand. Like every change you make is a
Yeah.
grain of sand that wears that mountain down. And there's no other way to make it happen. So that persistence really is the only way to create the ultimate change that you're after.
I buy what you said. I mean, there's big changes, but I love this metaphor of it's the small things that build up to that. Because that's the way it happens. That's my experience as
Yeah.
well. I mean, you may look back and say I changed for a year, but if you look at the dynamics of going through it, it's Esther Derby talks about micro changes and micro steps in her latest book, like 7 ways to affect change, cultural change. And it's that same. We often think that it's a big bang thing, and then that intimidates you. Oh my God, I don't have the muster for the big bang. Yes, it's a big bang, but you approach it with these micro changes, and then just persevere through it. Um, any other things on being the change that you can think of?
It's, I mean, that's one of those things where I struggle. So maybe some of the folks in chat can talk about the things that have driven them towards change. But I, it's like my brain can't work not in that manner. So I'm struggling to give listeners these nuggets of like, hey, I can go back to my job tomorrow. And I can drive change now because I'm thinking like this. And other than, as Kenya said, being courageous, that leap of faith, you're going to have to do it. Now you can play it safer and take a little baby leaps or little baby steps, right? You don't have to jump off a cliff, but you gotta start somewhere, and then it will snowball over time and get bigger and bigger.
Well, and again, I was alluding to it too. I think what's the motivation? Why? It it's going to grow you. It's going to grow you in directions that you didn't expect. Uh, and so if you're growth oriented, so what's in it for you?
Mhm.
You, right?
Yeah,
You. Uh, I mean, I've become, the leader you've become, the consultant you've become, the wonderful human being you've become. I'm going to ask for a loan later,
yeah, I
Josh.
got you.
Okay, I'm just setting the
Yeah,
stage.
that's fair.
I'm so subtle, but no, I think adversity, change, perseverance, these things. If you're into developing yourself, then that's what's in it for you. Uh, I can speak for this. Leaders, I'd love to hear you weigh in this. When I'm leading teams, I'm looking for change agents. I'm looking, and
Yeah,
there's not that many, and usually they're not popping up all over the place. So when one pops up, I'm like, holy crap, how cool is that? I
yeah.
think when you and I met, we were fellow change agents before we
Mhm.
started the Metacast. Like I paid it, it's
Yep.
like Josh Anderson. I have a little, I have an issue with Cincinnati and other stuff with this guy, Bearcat, blah blah blah. But no, but like-minded change agent. And that's another thing. Like how do you persevere through? Look for these folks in your organization. Find like-minded people. I think they stand up as lights.
Yeah.
And it can advance your career so react to that. Do you see it that way as well?
100%. When I'm looking at resumes, if they don't demonstrate a change in some of their
Ah,
job listings of,
yeah.
created this, built this because, or established CI and CD because our builds were taking forever
Yep.
and they were manual, all of that stuff. That's what I look for, because most of the other stuff is people are just listing their job description, and that doesn't tell me who you are. But what I'm looking for on those resumes or on that LinkedIn profile is, I was unable to accept this as good enough. And
Ah, I'm
and
with
I
you.
did something about it. I didn't just complain about it. And that's another one of those things, that's what's in it for you, is that thing that pisses you off or is frustrating or you hate doing, do something about it. Don't just
Yeah.
like stay on the treadmill. You have the opportunity for that thing that really bothers you. You can change something to make it even a little bit better. And then who benefits the most? You, because you've said like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, copying and pasting 75 columns every day from this spreadsheet to that. spreadsheet, just like I hate it and I have to do it every week, then do something about it. Don't wait for somebody to ask you to do something or tell you to do something about it. Just like do it.
One recommendation I might make is we were talking about perseverance and things. I was thinking of Angela Duckworth. So I want to give an action to the Metacasters. There's a TED Talk by Angela Duckworth. I think it's actually in the top 5 TED Talks of all time
Wow.
in listening. And she wrote a book called Grit. And terminology matters to me sometimes. I can
Hmm.
anchor, and I think of a change agent or someone who's changing. Be the change is your gritty, right? And so there's a book that she's written about it. I'm just looking at it. It's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance, and it's kind of a key for leading and making change happen. There's like a 20-minute video on it, Metacasters. That would be worth a look, because I think that's one of those get your gritty on. I don't know if
that,
I don't know.
that might be that might be the moment of this year's episodes.
Yeah, but get your gritty
Oh
on.
my gosh.
I can't, but you get the point.
I do. I do. I do. Just get your gritty on though. Everybody remember that. Wow.
So, so as a characteristic, so I maybe we drop it here. But then what's in it? What to do? How do you overcome it? How do you
Hmm.
generate momentum?
Hmm.
It really is about you. It's about you affecting changes for others. That's the thing with you and I, like everything we've done, it's not just an outward, there's sort of this yin yang thing.
Hmm.
It I'm affecting change and I'm also benefiting from the change
Yeah.
in small ways and large ways. And that's why to do it. I benefited from every conversation we've had on the Metacast for 14 years.
Well, here's a grandiose statement, and tell me if it's too optimistic of a view of the world. I can't imagine a time, and maybe this is just how I choose to look at the world. So maybe it's just Josh. I can't think of a change I attempted that in the end didn't make life better. Yes, I might have failed with that change, but the lesson I learned along the way helped me try a different change that got me over the edge. I can't think of any moment where I stuck my neck out and tried to do something different or even just a little bit different that in the end that wasn't a positive effect on my life and whatever else I was trying to affect.
There's that notion of failure and people react to failure in the agile community as bad and having negative connotations. And some people
Mhm.
reframe it to run the experiment. And there's just learning. It's not failure, it's learning. And that's what resonated with me. I have the same, now that I think about it, I have the same experience, Josh. I mean, I have failures. Clearly I have changes. Metacasters, I'm 22 years old. So look what look
Yep.
what change has done to me. But I've learned from everything. I've learned what not to do. Very often, and the other nuance to it is sometimes you think, well, it's all about them. So it's almost like a binary. It's 100. I introduce a change, and if it doesn't affect, it's all their fault.
Hmm.
What I've learned it's much more nuanced than that. So it's not just I've learned like how I can change myself in order to affect change. How do I be more
Yeah.
context? How do I be more situational in my nature? Much more nuanced. I think I've historically been, when I was youthful and a whippersnapper, I was very binary in my thinking, and I missed the nuance to life.
Yeah.
And but I agree with you. It's a
Same.
wonderful way. I'd rather do that and get slapped around quite a few times, etc., than
Yeah.
just
Good point.
sit on the log and whine and just watch, but never do anything about anything.
Hmm.
Right? I'm not wired that way.
Yeah, and there's all kind of TikToks and things out there that talk about this, but if you're thinking about the change and you're starting to question and like you're maybe going to bail on it, imagine yourself 10, 15 years from now. And imagine yourself thinking back to that moment when you had a chance to drive a change, but you chose not to. How's that going to make future you feel? It's probably not going to feel very good. So do it for future you.
Yeah,
Do it for
I
that
like.
version of you where you're going to look back and be proud that you tried. Maybe you failed, but at least you tried.
Yep. Steven said something I want to touch on real quickly before we close. He said, actually, that's a good discussion point. How, as a leader, do you help people become change agents, think logically, etc.? I have two reactions, Stephen. One is the role model. You
Mhm.
can show them. But the other thing that you inspired in me is I'm thinking back to my days at Eye Contact. I shared the change. I looked for folks. So there's folks who want to change, but they may not have an idea. So I would propose an idea to them. I would become like an advocate of them,
Mhm.
so that I wasn't driving all change. Consider me the. You're going to like this metaphor. I was the Johnny Appleseed of of change, of being the change, and I would sprinkle seeds of change out to people where it was fertile, and I would encourage them. And so what you're doing, you're giving opportunities, because very often folks will not see these opportunities for change. And as a leader, we don't have to do it. We don't have to exercise all of them. We can share them. And I was like sharing them. I was planting those little apple seeds. Josh, you're in awe. Let's see what
I
word
am
you my intrepid use of Johnny Appleseed.
I am going to this evening make a t-shirt of Bob with a metal pan on his head that says, "I am the Johnny Appleseed of change." I don't care if no one buys it, but I'm going to make it. I'm going to buy it. I can tell you that. Oh my
Do you
gosh.
think we've covered this the way we were hoping? I think so. I
I don't
first
know.
think
We
we
kind of wandered and found our way. But I think in the end, the messages that people need to hear came across.
be the change.
Yeah.
Be the change that's worthwhile. And it's a choice. So we're
Yeah.
not going to judge you, right? There's no judgment. But
Yeah. So I think as you listen to this, don't overthink it. Don't try and use some change framework or something or some
oh, good
85
point.
step process. Just do it. Just be
Do
the
it.
change. Yeah.
No. That is a perfect way to land this sucker. Don't overthink it. Just do it. Absolutely. You'll never change if you're overthinking stuff,
Mhm.
right? Just be it, and it's good. Make a mistake, move on. All right. We ready?
We are ready.
So, from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina, with a
And
smile on his
beautiful.
face and a
Oh,
spring in his step, I'm Bob Galen.
J- Johnny Appleseed, Bob Galen. And from beautiful Fuquay Arena, North Carolina, I'm Josh Anderson.
Shake.
And bake.
Take care, y'all.